What drew you to be so passionate for women's health?
You're a guest in the patient's life. For 10 minutes, you are that guest. You have to treat them with the utmost respect, but not just listen to them, but then try and help them so they have to leave feeling that you were helping them. The reason I wanted to do medicine was because I didn't want to get married. My mother is definitely much the modern matriarch, as you can say. The first thing that my father said to me once we got settled is, go to school. It's because the first time I learned English was like watching BBC News and EastEnders. Women talk in places of safety. We have a saying in our culture that if you give a woman some seeds in an orchard, she'll grow you an apple yard and some. And there's a softness to women, which is so much more powerful than everything else that we see around the world. My mother phoned me. Mrs. Salim is horrified that you said the word vagina before 8 o'clock. Medical gaslighting happens to the extreme as well. You breed contempt if you aren't familiar with your neighbour who's either Polish or Ukrainian or Sikh. I literally stand on the shoulders of giants. But when you're at the table, you make sure that you lift up others behind you.
Absolutely.
And that's the driver for me. That keeps me going.
Welcome back to The Mindset. I'm Dr Veena, and today I'm joined by a very beautiful and passionate woman who's a phenomenal educator. She is a GP specialising in women's health, family planning, menopause, a TV personality. You may have seen her on ITV This Morning, BBC Breakfast. She's an author, a clinical creator, a wife and mother. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr Nighat Arif to The Mindset.
Oh my God, my imposter syndrome just went crazy. Who is this woman she's talking about?
This woman is sitting right in front of me. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honour.
I'm so pleased to have you here. I remember the first time seeing you at one of the YouTube health conferences.
Yes.
And we may have exchanged a few words. And back then the mindset wasn't even like part of my, idea. And to have you sit across me now to really dive into your story is such a privilege. So thank you.
Honestly, it was such a privilege for you asking me because likewise, after meeting you at the YouTube Health Content Creators event in January, because that was the first time that they got all us health content creators together. When you're making content, especially education content, it's very, very lonely. Being a GP is very lonely. And I'm
so
sure we'll talk about that. And you were so kind. You came up to me and said, hello. I started following you on Instagram and then didn't see you at all. Well, I saw you on Instagram, but didn't see you in person until the 75th anniversary at Westminster. And literally across from my eyeline, I was like, there she is. That's Veena. And then like a child, we were waving across to each other. So I think that this was meant to be. And I think when you meet good souls, you connect. Whenever it comes around, it's like meeting an old friend.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's really kind. So, from what you've just said, being a GP is so lonely. I don't think a lot of people realize that. They think you see so many clients or patients or, your reception team, your admin team, it's quite busy. But I don't think people realize compared to, say, hospital medicine where you're working in an entire team, it's so different, isn't it?
It is so different. And general practice is the fact that you have a one-on-one consultation with the doctor. And we don't have MRI scans. We don't have blood tests to hand. We don't have a lot of technology there and then. It is literally being in tune with the patient's symptoms, listening to them. And I remember when I was training, my GP trainer said to me, you're a guest in the patient's life. For 10 minutes, you are that guest. You have to treat them with the utmost respect, but not just listen to them, but then try and help them so they have to leave feeling that you were helping them. Now, I know that it's very stressful in the NHS and I can't always achieve that. I try my best to achieve that, but sometimes circumstances beyond my expectations. My patients could be waiting for an hour and a half. So they come into my room very frustrated that they waited an hour and a half. But I have long days, long clinics, complex patients now. The pandemic has changed the way that we work. So it's hard to keep that value that we've always had, although we try so hard, at the expense of being burnt out as a doctor. Whereas in hospital medicine, you have amazing tests. You work as part of a team. There's a camaraderie. And unfortunately, you lose that. And I remember when I was sort of thinking about what I wanted to do with my career, because I never wanted to be a GP. I was thinking hospital medicine is where I'm going to be. I'm going to be like marching down the corridor, becoming a consultant gastroenterologist. General practice is, unfortunately, at the time was seen as you're a failed hospital doctor.
It still is.
It still is.
It still is.
It still is. And I think that I allowed that to be the thing that thrived or made me think, right, I need to do better because we're definitely not failed hospital doctors. We need to change that ethos around us. But also we've got to show that primary care is where 90% of medicine happens, and we've got to be able to treat patients, again, with the utmost respect, again, preventing into secondary care. And I actually found more camaraderie outside of my consulting room and my surgery, because it is, like you say, that loneliness.
No, it is, isn't it? Because you see, say 45 patients a day, but you're not seeing any of your colleagues, or you're not going out and discussing anything. It's just you, and you're that independent decision maker. So I remember when I first qualified, it doesn't dawn on you as much because you don't have a trainer to lean on, and you're just like, oh, so you just decide everything. Yeah.
You do. And I always say nobody comes to see the doctor because they fancied a day out. So you could literally spend a whole clinic of 45 patients and then plus on calls and admin, and not actually have a conversation with any other soul apart from, you know, what are your ideas, concerns and expectations? And how can I help you today? So no wonder, unfortunately, there is a lot of mental health. There's a lot of fatigue and burnout, and burnout's very real in medicine at the moment. That is affecting all of us.
Yeah. You know what you said about that one of your mentors said to you? I had a mentor who said something similar, who was like, this patient might have been waiting weeks and months for that 1 10-minute appointment. For you, it might just be another patient, but they've waited that long. So for them, they're not going to forget that consultation. So it's up to us to make sure each time is as succinct and as good as you can make it, isn't it? And to keep that going.
I always say you're only as good as your last consultation. It's like a chef. You're only as good as the last meal that you ate. And you try your best. You really do. I never go into work thinking I'm going to be absolutely horrific to my patients today.
No, I don't think anyone does.
And likewise, no doctor does that. But the system is against us, unfortunately. Hence why we do have junior doctors who are striking. We have consultants who are striking. And the NHS, I don't recognise the NHS the way it is now to how I trained. And that is multitude. It's such a complex multitude reasons.
And you've been a GP for over 16 years?
Yes, I have. I know I have. I'm what's known as a gypsy. So I'm a GP with a specialist interest. So I'm a generalist as well. But on top of that, I've been now a GP with a specialist interest in women's health for over a decade. And that means that I see anyone and everybody. But within my clinical practice, I also run a women's health clinic. In the past, I've set up women's health community hubs as well, which I now is part of the women's health strategy, but we've done preliminary work around that as well. And I also am a trained coil inserter. So I do marina coils, copper coils, IUDs for contraception and for HRT as well. So I'm what's known as a portfolio doctor, actually. I do lots of different things. I can literally rock up at any surgery and go, here's some skills.
Anyone want to hire me? You can do like everything.
I'm available for this.
So, you know, just taking it back, was medicine always what you wanted to do?
Yes. But I'll tell you why. The reason I wanted to do medicine was because I didn't want to get married.
Stop!
Honestly,
what?
I didn't want to get married. And the reason being was because I come from a very conservative family, and I'm the imam's daughter. My father's a priest. We run. I grew up in a mosque, and we have very traditional beliefs. My mother is definitely much the modern matriarch, as you can say. So I'm one of 5 siblings, and I came to the UK when I was 9 years old. And my father had said to my mother, "England is beautiful. There is no rain."
He obviously said the truth.
Yeah,
obviously the truth.
Of course, there's no rain. The weather's amazing here. So you leave sunny Pakistan. My mother was used to growing up in the fields because we are farmers back in Pakistan. Grew up in the Punjab. In fact, the village that I grew up in Bahawalnagar, is known as Thati Fateh. And that's because the British came along and they didn't even name the villages. They just gave them numbers along the River Indus. So we are 38 village. And when my father got his job at Chesham to lead the community, he stayed here for 5 years but didn't invite his wife and his children because he thought it was a temporary job in Buckinghamshire. And when it came to the fact that I was now growing older, I was nearly sort of, much older by then. My uncle, who's sadly passed away, said to my dad, "Nighat's getting older and she really wants to go to school, but we're not sending her. But she's very bright and you should take your children to the UK. They'll have a better future." So my father, my mother, me and my 2 brothers came over to the UK. I was roughly just turning about 9 years old
Yeah.
then. And I was on a huge adventure. I remember being very badly beaten by my grandmother when I was about sort of 7 or 8, because I was following my male cousins to the local school. But remember, this was like a mile away.
Right.
And she would always shave my and my cousin Asma, both of us, our heads as well, because she was so scared that we would either get kidnapped, trafficked off.
Really?
And so she would make us like tomboys. So I grew up climbing trees,
Yeah.
but thinking I was a boy actually for a very long time. And being absolutely distraught that I couldn't follow my male cousins into school with them, but knowing that I really wanted to learn. And so when I came to the UK, one, it was raining, and my father had promised us it wouldn't rain. It was the middle of April showers.
That was a lie, yes.
Exactly, such a liar. And then the first thing that my father said to me once we got settled is, go to school.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's for free? And he was like, it is for free. So when you don't have something and suddenly you're given education for free, it was like the light bulb had gone off. So I learned English. I loved watching TV as well. And I learned English by watching EastEnders. So I used to think that that's how you would speak, with an East End accent. And I was like, no, that's not right. So now I have a Buckinghamshire accent.
Yeah.
So the reason I don't have an accent, which everybody's like, oh, but you came here quite old, is because the first time I learned English was like watching BBC News and EastEnders. And this morning, now I have the privilege of being on that show and just being hungry for knowledge. And it was very much this conversation in the house that, oh, we're not expecting you to do so well. Just as the eldest daughter, we'll have an arranged marriage for you. And that was the expectation. My parents had an arranged marriage. We have a huge culture in our community which still endorses arranged marriages. And I said, what's the longest thing I can do to leave the house and not have an arranged marriage? So I said to my dad, I'll make a promise with you. I'll go and do medicine. And for 6 years, do not talk about marriage to me. And my dad genuinely thought I wouldn't get into medicine.
That's so
So we
funny.
had this conversation. I laugh now, but we did have this conversation where he said, why don't you become a teacher? It's 3 years and it's a shorter course. And I said, no, I'm going to get into medicine. Bearing in mind, I didn't go into a grammar school.
Yeah.
So I was hindered straight away from there. But thank God, in my case, for Tony Blair, he came in with this motto, education, education. And going to a sort of comprehensive government-run school, not from a private or a grammar school, I managed to get into Barts on the London to medical degree. And I suppose the rest is history. So that is literally why I did medicine.
I can let all our viewers know she is now married.
I am married. And we did have an arranged marriage, in fact. And we were married happily 16 years now.
I mean, there are so many
children.
success stories. And let me tell you, from what I hear in the dating pool now, everyone is actually thinking the generations before us they had the right answer. Get to know someone after you're married. Because honestly, it's no better the other way, I'm telling you.
Do you know what? Sometimes I sort of smile because I've got friends who have had love marriages, or, who've fallen. I've had friends who are in same couple relationships. I've got dear friends who've lived together for 30 years and never even married at all. And I've got friends who are trying to do the arranged marriage thing. And then I've got friends who just have chosen to be single. And I think there is no magic formula. No, That's the first thing. There is no magic formula. Number two, I think the biggest thing about relationships for me and my husband has been, we were best friends actually before we got married. So I grew up in Pakistan. He was older than me. There's a 9-year age gap between us. And he actually taught me how to climb trees in Pakistan. But I came to the UK.
Trees seem to be very pivotal
trees are, because we lived on a farm. So I used to do everything. And when he was older, he became a lawyer in Pakistan. I obviously became a doctor. And his family then approached my father, very traditional, said, would Nighat like to marry, or would, Khalid?
Yeah.
And my father then actually asked me and said, would you like to consider this marriage? My mother is very much Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. She would have suitors, but she wouldn't invite them to our house. She would take me on the pretense. I was at medical school. And she'd be like, let's go shopping together.
Oh, stop.
And in Sainsbury's,
it'll
be Rashida and her son.
Stop.
Accidentally. Oh, we've just bumped into each other.
Oh, over the yogurt carton.
And that was her introduction. Then I'd walk off and she would be like, what did you think of Ahmed? And I was like, was that your attempt to like introduce somebody to
That's
me?
so funny.
And arranged marriages are just that. It's essentially your parents just introduce you to somebody.
Yeah.
And you end up going on a couple of dates, where they could be chaperoned. And I think the difference that people always have in their mind is the concept of forced marriages.
Yeah.
So they think, okay, you're going to be forced to marry somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to step away from that. And I know so many successful arranged marriages, and I know so many successful people who fall in love and still married. Marriage is one of those, I still feel, a beast, which is really hard to understand.
Yeah.
I don't know what makes it work, but somehow it works.
It
for
works.
Some people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that. That was actually quite beautiful, knowing like what your journey was like going through all of that. So you got into med school, you finished medicine, you're out there now. What drew you to be so passionate for women's health?
Essentially, it was my women at the mosque. I grew up in the mosque, and women talk. Women talk in places of safety. And I'm a listener, actually, and I really love observing other women because I think they are so beautiful in everything that they do. They are the nurturers. We have a saying in our culture that if you give a woman some seeds in an orchard, she'll grow you an apple yard and some. And I think that whether we like it or not, we are nurturers, and there's a softness to women which is so much more powerful than everything else that we see around the world. And listening to them explaining symptoms in Punjabi, and so 9-year-old Nighat started to become the first person in her family who learned English and was the translator for her mother. But I didn't want to become a women's health specialist. I wanted to become a gastroenterologist because I thought I'd be a consultant. I'll do endoscopies and ERCPs, and I'll be a hospital, and I'll just be bossing it everywhere. And then I went into Slough, and I remember sitting in Wexham Park Hospital, and I would see a lot of Asian women because they would speak Punjabi and to me directly. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, a Pakistani woman would be holding onto the handlebars of her bed, palpitations, sweat dripping, feeling that the world is falling out beneath her, and saying that everything hurts. And she's been to 3 or 4 doctors, and they want to prescribe her antidepressants. And the symptom of arthralgia, head-to-toe pain, was something I'd constantly see on consultation notes. Low mood, irritability, anger, sleeplessness. And women come to women GPs, not do they only speak in places of safety, they come to the doctor. So that same woman that I saw in Wexham Park Hospital at A&E bed was the patient that I saw when I went into primary care, into community medicine as part of my training. And she said, the doctor gave me antidepressants, I'm no better. And I think it was more the fact that I didn't know what menopause was. I knew what menopause was. I didn't know the signs and symptoms of perimenopause. And I didn't understand the idea what our own hormones do to us. So when I went back to the mosque and the women were explaining similar symptoms, I'd say, I think you're describing perimenopause. They would laugh at me and go, no, Dr Nighat. Goriyan hunde, which means white women get perimenopause. And that blew my mind as a junior doctor. So you wouldn't say that diabetes just happens to white women. No. But menopause just happens to white women. Okay, so let's step back. Why do we think that? Well, it's because we've never been part of research. We've never been part of that conversation. And let's even step back a little bit from there. But the consequences of not having good estrogen levels affects your brain health, your heart health, and your bone health, and leads osteoporosis. Who gets the highest risk of cardiovascular disease? Asian women. Who gets the highest risk of osteoporosis? Asian women. Who has the highest risk of stroke? Asian women. So you almost think, okay, there's an area of medicine which I'm not visible as a woman of colour who wears a hijab. And also there's an area of research that I am dishing out to my patients in my GP practice where I'm actually not even accounted for, although I'm the doctor sat in the chair doing the work and part of the NHS and working for the NHS. So where do I go? I'm now in nearly 30 when I was thinking this, but where do I go? Because 40 is not too long.
No.
45 isn't too long.
No.
50 isn't too long away from me. So where do I go to the next doctor to go, I need help as a perimenopausal woman? And I think that's when there was almost like a light bulb moment going, okay, I need to improve women's health. But I need to improve women's health so that we have equality, but then somewhere along the lines have equity as well. where we are seen as women within a society and we're visible, we're heard as well. But not only are we seen and heard, that things that we need are actually done.
Yeah,
because
they're
for too long,
actioned.
things haven't been actioned.
Tell me about it. So from what you're saying, this being seen and heard, I remember being an F2 in a hospital, and this patient had come in. She was completely in a hijab and everything, and she was talking about exactly what you're saying, pain, pain, pain. I was on a surgical job. And as soon as she left the room, the senior reg said to me, oh yeah, it's what we call Bibi syndrome.
Yeah.
And I was like, excuse me? And me being the junior, I started looking up, what is this Bibi syndrome? I was like, wait a minute, is this just racism? Like, there is no syndrome like this. What do you mean? And he was just like, no, they have other problems, but then they just say it's pain everywhere and they can't. And I was just like, no, I don't think that's it. Like, but imagine a person who's much senior, who's meant to be guiding you in your education, your training, casually throw these terms around. How is that okay?
We have a lot of institutionalized racism.
And I
within the
remember
NHS.
not being okay with it, Nighat. I remember
And
just voicing it and getting a hard time for it as well, actually.
The more you unpick, the more sadder you get. You know, black women have a high tolerance for pain.
Yeah.
And they have, there's actually a gynecological paper that calls black women having super bodies because their skin means that they have a higher tolerance pain. Utter rubbish. And I'm not going to swear, but I swear a lot, actually. And the fact that, Asian women can be disregarded or they're discounted because of what they say. Women are not taken seriously. Medical gaslighting happens to the extreme as well.
Yeah.
But it's even not. It's not even a marginalised group. I remember being taught that celiac only happened to Irish women. Do you remember that?
What?
Honestly, I remember reading it as a medical student going, celiac is more prominent within the Irish community.
Yeah.
Certain conditions are more prominent within the Jewish community, or this is more prominent within the traveller community. And actually, that's not true.
No.
It's really deeply embedded within racism.
Yeah.
And it means that we are clumping communities together based on their disorders. And what kind of society are we? Because we're not looking beyond that and going, okay, we actually need to research you guys and support you guys, because the mindset that we have is that, say that we get a Irish person, we don't think of sickle cell disease.
You just be like homing in on the track,
Exactly. The fact that we only think sickle cell happens to black women or black people is utterly crazy, because that's not true at all. Or thalassemia only happens to Asian people. And I think that is the saddest bit about medicine, that we know about these things like Bibi Begum, because most of our names are Bibi or Begum. My mum is actually Mrs. Bibi. And you see that and you're like, you're discounting my mother, because not her symptoms or her lived-in experience, but mainly based on the fact that you see past her and through her, and she's not actually
just think
a human.
It's quite disrespectful. And I think for this new generation of doctors coming up, I really think we should voice it more. Like, anytime you hear someone mention this about any group, I think just question it. Based on what? What are you basing this on?
That's
like, what's the studies?
Joy of social media now. I think that this whole, I hate the thing, wokery and being woke. Because it means that Gen Z have suddenly said, we're not going to perpetuate the generational trauma that we've experienced, and we're going to actually hold people accountable. So done are the days of being narrow-minded and homophobic, done are the days of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. I'm not saying that those things don't exist.
Yeah,
they
of course
do exist
they do.
within our society. But it means that we're actually questioning the situations that we've been led to feel are the norm.
Yeah.
And I think social media, for all it's bad, there's lots of medical
there's lots of good
misinformation.
though, isn't there? Yeah.
But this is where I think social media has given somebody like me a platform, because that's where I started. Never would I see someone who looked like me be talking about vaginal dryness.
Yeah.
A woman with a hijab talking about vaginal dryness. But it gave me the opportunity accidentally to go, actually, this is what I do in my GP practice, and someone that looks like me is far more relatable to someone who also looks like me.
Yeah.
And you can cut through that generational issues and trauma and hang-ups of racism and prejudice, and just go, okay, on a human level, I'm going to speak to you about what I know, and this might help you.
Absolutely. I think it's point of reference, relatability, and then all of a sudden thinking it's doable. For something as vague as when Rishi Sunak became PM, every brown person in the country yes, fine, there are pros and cons, but felt like, oh, so we can like walk a bit with our head a bit higher. He was like lighting candles for Diwali, and all of a sudden your culture is a bit more seen and a bit more heard. And it's like, did you even think that was possible before? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's attainability.
Yeah.
That this is something that's attainable for me. And we all want to grow as communities, but also we all want to make sure that we live in a more cosmopolitan, more tolerant and understanding community. I definitely do. And that comes from having familiarity. You breed contempt if you aren't familiar with your neighbor who's either Polish or Ukrainian or Sikh or Italian, or they might be from the LGBTQ plus, or they might be trans. You know, you build more bridges if you reach out to them and understanding them. I think sometimes even crossing the boundaries and speaking to your enemies is sometimes the only way to understand them, because by breeding familiarity, having those people attainable and visible to you, you're like, oh, actually, they're exactly like us. Like Rishi Sunak is exactly like us. All right, okay, he might have his millions,
with similar problems,
yeah, but he has similar problems than us. He has to get up every day.
Yeah. So, you know, it's one thing having that passion to educate, to build that knowledge, to do that for the community. But then where do you find that stamina to keep it going, to keep building? Because, yeah, fine, it was platforms, then it was a clinic, then it was a private work you do. And now it's this amazing book that you've published. So where do you find that fuel to keep going for that?
I am lifted by some incredible women. I literally stand on the shoulders of giants. So, like, this isn't something that I do. I think sometimes you're fumbling along and then you don't find your tribe. And when I started, I couldn't find my tribe. I actually got a lot of backlash from originally. You know, who's this hijab woman in BBC Breakfast talking about masks and vaccines? You know, that woman is telling me to go and get my flu jab, or, you know, how dare she talk about breast examination? And I remember the first time I went on BBC Breakfast, and I was wearing similar clothes and did a demonstration of how you would palpate your breast. And it was actually Muslim men and women who just then flooded my social media.
It's always your own community. It's always your own community.
It is your own community. And that saddens me. And so it's because, again, they're not familiar with it.
No, yeah.
And so I feel sympathy. I feel empathy, actually. Sympathy is not the right word. I feel empathy because this is so beyond their norm. Because when you're not seen and heard, and then someone who looks like you is now examining their breast in front of Dan Walker. Like, let's just put it in context. How dare she? And so I can empathize with that's not their norm. But actually, for something like that to open up the window for so many, and then on the flip side, women are going, because of you, I checked myself and I found a lump. And multiple over, it's men as well going, oh, I didn't realize I had to check myself as well. And I think that by having individuals who say your name in the right places, who open doors for you, who lift you up to the table, but when you're at the table, you make sure that you lift up others behind you.
Absolutely.
And that's the driver for me. That keeps me going. I'm a huge fan. I guess fan isn't the right word, but I love communicating. I'm a huge fan of learning. I love to learn from people. And I know my book is called The Knowledge, which isn't about taxis, by the way. Although it could be. I still feel I'm humble enough to know I don't have all the knowledge. Yeah. And so the only way that works is that if you have all the right people at the table, but it's not even about me taking credit at the end of it. I don't really give a shit.
No, but you should definitely take credit. This is incredible.
But like, it doesn't really bother me if at the end of the day somebody takes stuff out my book and then rehashes it and uses it because it's an inspiration for their content. I don't even want to be quoted to say I took it from Dr Nighat's book. What I want you to do is pass that evidence-based medicine on so that other people who don't have the knowledge can light their candle in it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about individuals taking credit. It's the community getting together and people getting together for better women's health. Because I fundamentally believe that when the woman is well, the whole household is well. And if the household is well, the economy thrives. And if the economy thrives, we have a more cohesive society and a harmonious world, and hopefully more women at the highest levels and presidents and CEOs and prime ministers, because then we wouldn't have so many wars.
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream, isn't it?
That's the dream.
No, and I think, I couldn't put it better myself. You can see the fire you have inside you for the community, for building, for kind of imparting that knowledge about, right? When you navigated more into television, was there any setbacks or any challenges that you faced?
Many. But they were, I have a life of humour. It's because it happened by accident to me. I wasn't looking for it.
Yeah.
I'm a NHS GP, just a GP working in her clinic, accumulating knowledge along the way, picking up stuff.
Yeah.
I have a notebook which I write things down, and I'm very much a person, if a patient tells me something, even if I don't have the answer, it sticks away in my brain for ages. I'm dyslexic. So for me, making voice notes and things is the way that I do it. I'm not the best writer, so writing a book was a huge challenge. But the thing that I found was that because my social media had really sort of gone crazy, mainly because I was talking about the stuff that everybody was seeing in their practices, but weren't really putting the jigsaw pieces together. So it started in 2018. I was on maternity leave with my third son. And as you do when you're on maternity leave, I ruminate a lot. And I put on Twitter, is everybody else seeing Asian women get the diagnosis, although it's a symptom, it's not a diagnosis, of all over body pain?
Yeah.
Everything hurts, Dr. Nighat.
Everything hurts. Yeah.
Everything hurts. And this all over body pain is not miscellaneous medical symptom, or it's not because they are depressed. I think it might be perimenopause.
Yeah.
It by accident got picked up by Lisa Kelly, who's a producer at BBC Breakfast. She's now doing amazing things, but I'm still in touch with her. And Lisa said, we're doing something called Wake Up to the Menopause. Do you want to come along and talk about your experiences of what you're doing with your South Asian community in Slough? And I said no. It was like,
You were
I'm on
like,
maternity leave.
Thanks, but no.
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm on maternity leave. I'm breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And she just went, we'll do your makeup and hair. And I was like, I'll be there tomorrow. Look, as a mother of 3 kids who's never had a makeover and her makeup done, who's never been on the BBC Breakfast sofa, I'm going to take that opportunity just to get my makeup done. So I went up to Manchester and I did 6 minutes, talked about my work.
Yeah.
The things that we never talk about within our community: vaginal atrophy, risk of breast cancer and HRT, intimacy, mood-related, mental health and menopause. And I came off the sofa going, this was amazing.
Yes.
This is really great. My mother phoned me. Mrs. Salim is horrified that you said the word vagina before 8 o'clock.
I can't.
Nothing humbles you quicker than your parents.
Literally, this is the thing, right? Because even with patients, sometimes when they come and they're from very conservative communities, when they want to explain something personal, they whisper it to me.
Yeah.
It's just me and them in the room, and they're like, "I have this problem." I'm like, "Why are we whispering?
Why are you whispering? Why are you whispering?
Like, no one's here.
My mother was distraught. She was horrified that I had, and I think even I'm sure somewhere the BBC producers were probably freaking out, going, "Oh my God, she said the word vagina, and it's not even 8:30 yet." But to me, I was just a healthcare professional. I was like, "This is my
part
last
of your body.
gig, and this is fine. I'll go."
Yeah.
And then it was gradually, like later on, you get those sort of small whispers going, "Oh, it'll be so much nicer if you didn't have a hijab. Your name is a bit complicated."
Stop.
Oh, honestly. It's really great, but your face just doesn't fit what we're looking for.
Fair.
Not that I actively went looking for media, because I was making social media. I mean, I'm working as a GP. But those sort of little comments or you're just not the right vibe for our show today. Unfortunately, you get those. And I completely understand that, because unbeknownst to me, when the pandemic happened, the BBC producers in 2020 phoned me, and we had just renovated our house, and said, we're looking for some doctors, and Nighat, we've worked with you before, would you be happy to come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and talk about what's happening in general practice? Because as we can see, all the doors are closed. I was like, mate, I'm up at 6:30 in the morning. I read Fajr prayers, and I'm a mother to 3 kids, so I'm up fairly early. I don't mind coming on Zoom and doing my stint. And every gig is, in my head, my last gig. They went around my house virtually. It was when we were all under lockdown. Do you have a bookshelf?
Yeah.
Matt Hancock has a bookshelf.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't have a Matt Hancock bookshelf, I'm afraid, but I have my kitchen. And I normally would have a cup of tea and I'm happy to do it for my kitchen. And they were like, okay, that's fine. And I ended up being the doctor, doing it for 2 years.
Wow.
And still do stuff for BBC Breakfast from my kitchen.
Did you get a bookshelf now?
I don't have a bookshelf even now. Thank God.
Where'd you store this? Where'd you keep this?
Actually, it's just
in the car,
in the boxes around the house. And that's when I realised that Middle England woke up and were like, who is she? Who is this woman who is in her kitchen? And you get the usual remarks. Unfortunately, I did have lots of racism where, you know, the lovely Dan Walker and Richard Frediani, Freddie, who's the editor at BBC Breakfast, then had to sort of step up for me because this woman is telling me to wear masks and she's the sister of ISIS and, you know, ridiculous stuff, saying that, likening me to a terrorist. And I think there is still a woman wearing a hijab triggers some people. And it's just purely because they don't have the familiarity.
Yeah.
And I've grown up with that in the NHS. I moved into a very posh surgery in a very white area. And I remember taking over from a GP, a lovely GP who's a dear friend of mine, and she'd been there for like 25 years. And I'd taken over her list, and the patients phoned the practice just to check that I was the right type of Asian for them and that I didn't have an accent. And that my name was so complicated. And I would literally get phone calls every day as I was having that introduction to the practice, because you have something called like getting used to the practice. Patients who just wanted to understand how I spoke. And then they would be like, oh, you speak like us. And I'm used to that. That's your lived in experience.
And then you don't like,
I don't even think that I've got to the point to say that's racism. I think it's because it's unfamiliarity.
I agree. I think it's a lot of preconceived notions that limit the way you view the world and experience the world. And then that can negatively impact somebody. I think you're quite a strong person, so you take it on the chin. And like you said, you have this insight to be empathetic towards communities. But if someone wasn't that strong, Nighat, I think they'd struggle, right?
I think we see it all. In lockdown, you know, I was in the park with my 3 boys, and just as we'd come out along those lovely summer holidays, my kids speak Punjabi with me, and we speak. And this gentleman who was obviously really disgruntled by these, you know, women wearing a hijab who looked like, you know, she probably stepped off a boat from somewhere, shalwar kameez, and these kids speaking Punjabi, turned around and then just said to my children, "This is Britain. Speak British." Firstly, there is no language called British.
It's like speak Indian, isn't it? So when people tell me, like, oh, do you speak Indian?
And my son just went, "You mean English? We need to speak English. We do speak English. What are you talking about?" And then he turned around and I turned around to look at him, and he was just like, "Oh my God, Dr. Nighat, I watch you on BBC Breakfast." And I just thought to myself, and he completely changed. And I think that inherently is because we have these prejudgment and pre-notions about people. And actually it is constantly reaching out to others and breaking down those barriers. It doesn't matter if your face doesn't fit, but the fact that you're there means a huge amount. It doesn't matter if you wear a hijab. The fact that you are there representing means a huge amount.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you come from a certain section of society, intersectionality, which doesn't get represented all the time. The fact that you're there and then bringing up others with you in numbers, you will make a change because you breed familiarity with other people.
Yeah, and I think it's exercising that muscle. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think having that open mind to just maybe understanding the person in front of you, or like you said, just listening to their story, right? You just,
Exactly. And then you realise, oh, you do speak like us. And in fact, your food is delicious, and you have spices, and you have songs which are absolutely amazing. And the joy is, and this is where I think the younger generation have it spot on, because they are so much more open-minded. They are so inviting. And I see my kids, my 3 boys, and it's really sad because my 12-year-old knows that if he's a boy of colour, British, Pakistani, Muslim boy wearing a hoodie will always get picked on more than his white friend George that he's in the park with. So you know how to play the game, but actually what you do is you invite that person in and say, I'm actually no different to you. And my boys are constantly doing that. And when you see the world through your kids' eyes, you think, as an adult, you have 2 choices. You could either breed that hate even further, or what you could do is just say, no, I'm going to get you to integrate integrate, have interfaith dialogues, talk a lot more, learn a lot more about that person, whether it's a physical learning, neurodiversity, LGBTQ trans community. Their faith is different to you, their color is different to you. Learn about them, and that's constantly, I think, the only way that you get over barriers, and that's how I've got over, I hope, some of the barriers on my media and
I think
social media.
I think the work is amazing. And it's funny because you know how you said you came here when you were about 9. Our family emigrated here when I was around 13, so I'd done a lot of schooling in Mumbai, and I remember being in this place called Ipswich where I was for a year. And we had to write an essay. We had to write an essay on someone you look up to, and I wrote mine on Princess Diana. I loved English. I loved the language. Wrote this thing, and the teacher, she took me outside the class, and then asked me if an adult helped me with the essay. She was like, "I've never given a level 8 out, and it's weird. I'm giving it to the girl from India in my class. I was the only brown girl." And I remember thinking, why would an adult help me? I was so offended. I was like, I wrote this myself, But when a teacher then questions, how do you know English, and how are you speaking well? And again, I guess what they would have just seen on TV is back then would have been like poverty and what TV shows about India.
Mainstream media has to change.
And it is. I think
probably
slowly.
Count on my hand, the amount of hijabbed Muslim women that you see. And I think the regular person is Nadia from Bake Off, and they adore her.
Yes.
But she was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. And she now has her show, but she won Bake Off 10 years ago.
Wow.
So you're thinking, hang on, over 10 years ago she won Bake Off. And then who's the other prominent Muslim women?
Yeah.
I suppose the twins from, or the sisters on Gogglebox, if you watch Gogglebox, I adore them two. And then the recent doctor who's a breast cancer surgeon who won Sewing Bee. And then me.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody else unless I've forgotten anybody. And you're like, what?
No, but I think the shift will happen, Nighat.
There's like nearly roughly about 2 million women who wear some form of head covering in this country. But
I think it's about making, and I think it's about making those waves, and it's going to happen. And I think you're now a point of reference for so many households. So people at home might be telling their moms, "I want to be like Dr. Arif."
That's so kind.
But it's true, right? Because did you have that growing up? You didn't. So I think they will have that now.
But I do remember very vividly Naga being my first sort of person of colour that I saw on BBC Breakfast, coming out at nights at Milton Keynes Hospital, and I was sitting there having my breakfast and turned on BBC Breakfast, and there was this sort of sparkly, very articulate, intelligent, I mean, she's super, I mean, I get to call her a friend, which is a huge privilege now, intelligent person. And she was my first point of reference, and I was like, God, look at her, she's incredible, and she's bossing it. And she still is. I mean, she's a phenomenon and a force. And I think that having those points of references are so great. But I don't want there to be another Dr. Nighat. I want there to be another whoever who is amazing. Yeah. And I'm completely aware that I'm replaceable. And I think that's a good. In about 2 years' time, there'll be a younger, hotter, six-pack hijab-wearing hijabi who's going to be... who's going to take over, who's just, walked off Love Island. I mean, wouldn't that be awesome? She's talking about women's health. Yeah. I totally know I'm replaceable, but that's how it should be. It should be that you've done your tiny, 5 seconds, and then you move on and you hand the baton on to someone who is younger, hotter, has a six-pack and a hijab and off Love Island.
I mean, the good thing about being in a field where knowledge is what kind of keeps you at the forefront. I don't think it matters what you look like and have any kind of six-pack. I think it's what's in there.
It doesn't.
It's in there.
I think that's the value. That's what I mean. The strings to our bow and the variety, it has to move on.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I can't wait to meet the next hijab-wearing six-pack woman. I don't have a six-pack.
I would love to see her six-pack, but fine. Oh, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure hearing your story and some of the challenges, not just from your upbringing, but how you navigate all these different things, from television to your clinics to all of this. Thank you so much. We're now going to move into a fun part. This is the rapid fire part. Okay. It's got to be rapid. It's got to be fire. I feel like you'll have no problem with this.
Okay.
I'll ask you questions. First thing that comes to your mind. Ready? Your favorite type of consultation?
Fun conversation. Actually, my favourite type of consultation, it's got to be rapid fire, where there's laughter.
Okay.
I laugh a lot with my patients.
Do you?
I do. I joke around a lot with my patients.
Most memorable moment on TV?
Oh, God. Probably teasing Ben Thompson and asking what rubber he wears.
Okay.
Don't put that in. Oh my God, don't put that out there.
The nicest, we'll talk about that at the end afterwards.
We're talking about rubber
there we
gloves.
go, context, rubber gloves, yes. Nicest compliment you've received?
I always get told that my smile is beautiful. And get this, I used to hate my smile when I was growing up. I have very few features, but yeah, the compliment is I have a nice smile.
You do have a beautiful smile. Hardest part of your job?
Time. I'm very time poor.
If not GP, general practice, what specialty?
I would have loved to be an actress. Do you know what? Had I had another life, oh mate, I would have bossed it as an actress.
I mean, you still could.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think you still could.
Nobody wants a middling age.
Pass the baton away and go to your auditions and self-tapes. I mean, if anyone's listening and wants to cast
if anybody
Nighat.
wants to cast Nighat, then, you know.
I mean, there is a lot of acting involved in our job, but not, I guess you can't be a different role. You're still playing the doctor. Fine. Okay, fine. If you could have dinner with one person, anyone in the world, who would it be and why?
Michelle Obama. Hands down, she's my woman. And the reason I want to speak to her is because I think that she said something really significant. She said that when you're a woman on a mission and you want to ask for something, you're always seen as the angry woman or the irritable woman or the woman that makes a fuss or the woman that causes irritation to others. You know, she's the angry black woman. And I think to a perspective from my my work as a women's health advocate, I get that a lot and I understand that and I feel that to my bones. So I think that she would be somebody I'd love to just sit and have, even if it gets to like 10 minutes.
We're manifesting this. It's
Yeah,
going to happen. It's going to
she's my
happen.
woman.
It's going to happen. What would you have for dinner with her?
What would I have? Oh, it has to be a chicken salad.
Okay.
Like, nothing highbrow, a burger. We're having, the Bahamas and me are going to have a burger.
If you could create one super drug, what would it be?
I think it has already been invented, the pill. To me, the invention of the contraceptive pill has been the number one liberator for women.
Yes.
Because it meant that we are not just there to have children. And also it lifted the patriarchy a little bit. Now, I know it's not the best thing, but the fact that you can have something which is just known as the pill, and everybody knows exactly what you're talking about, is utterly phenomenal. And it means that women had some control over their body and their fertility. They had careers that they could go to. They were let out of the house, and I think for me, it's a single amazing invention that has been the liberation of women, to my mind. Still.
Yeah, that umbrella of contraceptives, isn't it? Where
but it's not just for contraceptive. It's the fact that it can help manage symptoms of endometriosis, painful periods, heavy periods. It can manage symptoms of, say, all the side effects of you bleeding. It allows you to travel if you wanted to stop your periods, that you could, stop them if you wanted to. It allows you to pursue your career, that flexibility. If you choose not to have children, that's a whole other conversation for another day. That's absolutely fine. You have complete autonomy, yet you can be, if you wanted to, an independent sexual being. And I think that's something that we don't really talk about, the sexuality of women. We think that only men want sex. I can tell you women want a lot of sex. And in my clinics they do. Filled to the clinic talking about sex. But it is something that I think is the last taboo, talking about that women are sexual beings.
No, absolutely. One message to the 20-year-old Nighat.
That's a tough one, because 20-year-old Nighat was so insecure. If I think back to her, she was hung up of the fact that she didn't like her nose. She had big lips. She had these high cheekbones. Trying to find her space.
People pay for those cheekbones right now, can I just say?
God. I know, thank God for the Kardashians. If it wasn't for the Kardashians, big lips and cheeks would not be celebrated. And my 20-year-old Nighat would be really, I would say to her, just keep moving, just don't stop, and it works out in the end. That's what I would say.
One medical myth, that a woman needs to have a period. So women who are on long-term contraceptives, say like the coil, who may not have a bleed for 5 or 6 years, does a woman have to have a bleed?
A woman does not have to have a bleed if she chooses not to, and that comes with a caveat. The reason we have a period is because of multiple reasons. It's hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and a little bit of testosterone and a follicle-stimulating hormone. And it means essentially you didn't fall pregnant, and so the lining of the womb comes away. But for some women, they're not blessed with just having a normal, regular period, whatever normal is, because we still don't know medically what that means. But they are really hindered, and their activities of daily living are really hindered. Or for some, actually, they just want to stop their periods because they want to go traveling. And for some, they want to stop their periods because they just don't want to fall pregnant. They choose to be child-free, and that's absolutely fine. And I think that's a choice that they've made.
Yeah.
So medically, in my head, it makes sense that you don't have to have a period if you choose not to. And there are long-acting reversible contraceptives that you can have, that whatever time you choose to come off them, your fertility will return, your periods will return, and it's completely safe to do that. And I think it comes back to women having freedom and control over their bodies.
Absolutely. Because I get a lot of patients asking me the same thing, but isn't that unhealthy to not bleed? Where does the blood go? And I can see why they'd think that if you don't have the medical knowledge. Because they're like, where does the blood go? Does it just stay in your body? I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that.
And I've had really intelligent, smart women who go, but isn't it just going to build up and build up and back into my body? And it's like, no, because actually all you're doing is taking the hormones are just suppressing that layer. So it doesn't enrich it at all. And the concept that we have is that you have to bleed. For some, that's really restrictive. But I think that, again, is rooted in medical misogyny and the patriarchy, I'm afraid. And so it's about giving women control over their bodies. And no, you don't need to have a period just to clean things out from the inside. There is no cleaning that needs to happen
cleaning. The blood doesn't clean anything.
It doesn't clean anything. It's just an indicator that you didn't fall pregnant.
So funny.
But you need to have a good lifestyle. You need to have great bone health. You need to have great strengthening exercises to help with your bones and the quality of your bones. And mental health is really important as well. So with your periods, yes, for some women, having a regular period means that they feel that they've got that's their way of controlling their body. Their mental health stays really well. So you cannot be prescriptive
of it, isn't it? It's never one size fits all.
It's never one size fits all. That's it.
But cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next part. You asked me what these little balls were. So these are my little pearls, okay? This part, you pick a pearl. It's going to have a topic written on it. And you give us your pearl of wisdom on that topic.
Okay.
Ready?
All right.
Go.
Oh, they are so good. Ooh. Be good if I didn't. Fitness. Oh, okay. My pearl of wisdom is learn something new. About 18 months ago, I learned how to swim. When I was about 7 in Pakistan, I nearly drowned.
Okay.
And so that put the fear of God into me. And also when I came to the UK, we were taught how to swim at school, so we'd have swimming classes, but my mother was horrified by the fact that her daughter would have to wear a swim costume. So she really didn't buy me one, and she sort of refused to send me to swimming lessons. So again, the fear of the water was there anyway. And when I came out of lockdown, so about 18 months ago, I had a chat with my team at Her Spirit, which is run by Mel and Holly and Professor Greg White, who's an Olympian, and the man is like incredible. And he said to me, we live on an island. And I realised, oh my God, we do. We think of the Caribbean as an island.
No, but we are an island.
We are
That's
an
why
island.
the rain and the weather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're on an island and I don't know how to swim. But also, my boys didn't know how to swim. My oldest was coming up to about 9 years old. And the other one was about sort of 7.
Yeah.
And the youngest was about 3 or 4. And I just thought, okay, they don't know how to swim. And this is something that I can't do. So I took them to the swimming lesson. They sat on the side of the pool and the 3 of them cried. And that's when I thought, I need to get into the pool with them.
Yeah.
So I started to learn how to swim with loads of support. I actually watch YouTube videos.
Yeah, no, they're really good.
To get the techniques of how to swim. Took off all my armbands, and now I'm an independent swimmer. Yay. And I do up to 700-800 meters.
Look at you
every day. Well, I say every day, about 4 or 5 times a week actually. Nice. And I went swimming this morning.
Nice,
learn a new skill.
Amazing. And after the pearl, I normally ask the guests, is there one question you'd like to ask me? You don't have to, but if there is anything.
Yeah. What is your key fitness go-to?
So for me, variety is the spice of life. So I weight train, I dance, I do Pilates, I go to Barry's now and again. But if I do just one thing, it really does bore me. You can't do for me, you can't do exercise just to exercise. It's got to be something that pushes you and you learn something, exactly what you said, that excites you a little bit. And then afterwards, you're even surprised. I didn't know my body could do that. Or I didn't know I was that flexible. And it's kind of cool. Yeah.
I definitely, I can't just do one thing.
No.
I can't do one thing. I need to do a combination of different things. And your body just then doesn't even progress forward.
No,
Not
and then...
that I'm tiny, by the way. I'm a size 12 woman.
No, but you'd be surprised because I can do things now in my mid-30s that I probably couldn't in my mid-20s, you know, in terms of strength and flexibility. So I think all these preconceived things we put in our minds about age and limiting yourself and what exercise should look like, it really needs to be shed.
Definitely.
Oh, Dr. Nighat, thank you so much. Oh my goodness.
Having me along.
Guys, it was an absolute honor having this incredible woman in front of me. If you have any questions for her or myself, I'll leave her contacts below. You can write to her, you can reach out to her. She's very busy, but you will see her either on radio, TV, social media. You can't hide from her. She'll be there. And we'll also leave links to how you can reach and get hold of this amazing book. It's actually an absolute wealth of knowledge. When I look through, I can't wait to read it actually. From the images, the details, every woman should actually read this book to just understand what happens to our body on a molecular, cellular level, just so you can get more control of your life. But thank you so much for tuning in. See you soon. Nighat.
Thank you.
Right.